question is still being asked. Where are we? What is this place where heaven and earth, or existence and non-existence, or permanency and impermanency, or we could even say the inner and the outer meet? And over these days, old stories have been told to explore the meanings of words such as luck, truth, love. But when we look at these closely, we find that they all have opposites. Like there's good luck and bad luck. We know this. And we know that there are truth and there are lies. And we know that there is love and there is hate. So casting around to find something represented by a word that has no opposite. I had a eureka moment, because the word that came to me was grace. Casting around, it's not possible to find an opposite or a counter force to grace. And this is asked of us. But if we explore the meaning of this word as we did with truth and love and luck, it immediately reminded me of an old story that creates an enigma for us relative to this word. So putting it out to us, let's see where it leads us in an endeavor to come to a recognition and awareness of what for us is that which has no opposite, represented in the word grace. And it's that story of that man who was born at that time where there were strict religious truths and so forth, which he tried to live by, and that was, you do good works and you're going to get a return for your good works. But he found that in putting this into practice, it didn't really work for him, even when it came to the point when people would say, well, you do good things and you're going to get your rewards in heaven. And he explored heaven and he couldn't find what heaven represented, so he really was in quite a dilemma until he thought he'd found what was something that was inviolable, a truth, according to where he was at in his belief systems. And that was that God will provide. So he decided, like these other things, that he would put it to the test. So he sold everything, gave up everything, and decided to cast himself into the world to put a test to this absolute that he had thought was an absolute, that God will provide. So he set out on the road, devoid of everything. And finally, of course, in the heat of the day, he had to come to rest under a tree, and when he did, there were fancy carriages that went by, there were horsemen, there were farmers, there were all kinds of travelers going along this road, and none of them took any notice of him. None of them stopped to ask about his well-being or where he was going or what he was doing. So when he got up and arose and went on with his travels, of course the days were long and there was no food. He was hungry and thirsty. Well, his stomach grumbled after a few days of what was going on. And he did come to a river where he was able to slake his thirst, but that didn't assuage the grumbling of his stomach that was hungry. So he continued with his walking. But then, one day, when he'd sat down by the river to rest as it came, suddenly he espied a package, a little parcel floating down the river. So he used his stick to drag it in, and when he opened it up, the most wonderful smells assailed his nose. The smell of honey and cardamom. It looked like and it tasted like the most delicious halwa that he'd ever had. And he thought to himself, blessing, grace, God does provide. So he tested this and he found that every day at the same time down the river would come the little parcel, the little package, and he'd open it up and there was his delicious halwa sustenance. So he decided he had to find the root of where this was coming from. Where did this grace, where did this blessing arrive from? So he followed the river along, and again, every day down the river would come the parcel of halwa, and every day his resolve to find out where this blessing, this grace was coming from, came to him. And finally, he turned a bend in the river, and the river was very wide. And in the middle of the river, he saw a great edifice resembling a castle, but it had a turret and balconies there. And he looked and he watched. And as he was watching, out of one of the turrets came a maiden. And coming to the edge of the balcony, she tossed over the parcel and cast it into the river. So he knew where it was coming from. And he wanted to go there. He wanted to find out the source of where this blessing, this grace was arriving from. But there did not seem to be any access to this citadel in the middle of the river. But as he was pondering this, he saw an old monk also sitting by the side of the river. And after the greetings, they exchanged what they were on about, the monk saying he was on a pilgrimage, and the man stating that he was looking to the source of this grace and this blessing. Oh, said the monk, that citadel is inhabited by a maiden who refused the hand in marriage of a certain man who was a sorcerer. And he has surrounded that citadel with demons and all kinds of impossible creatures that do not allow anyone to arrive there. Oh, said the man, but I've got to find out. I've got to find out where this grace, this blessing is coming from. So the monk said, well, I can give you a practice that will give you the power to be able to deal with those forces, if you care to do so. Oh yes, I'll do whatever you want Whatever you say, said the man. So the monk gave him some practice to undertake, and the monk then had to leave because he was on his pilgrimage, and left the man to his practices, which he did. Now, to cut a long story short, it came to the place where the man had to use this ability that he found had come to him to deal with those evil forces, and there were several. To make the story out of it, who was there. But he traversed and managed to deal with each of these impediments to his destination. And finally, he came in to the presence of the beautiful maiden. And he was so grateful. Thank you for the blessings and the grace that you've bestowed on me. And I want to ask you, please, where does this arise from? And he explained that every day he received a package, grateful for it. And she answered him and said, I cannot answer your question because what you have experienced as a blessing and a grace is merely the residue of my daily bath. Every day I bathe in the mixture of elements that are there to cleanse myself and cast it into the river. But in that moment, in that very moment, the man had a realization, a recognition, the understanding, the answer to the question that had arisen for him. Was it to find the source of grace? He already, to him, knew its meaning. But to discover that it was from this maiden merely the residue of what she used to purify her body brought to him this extraordinary awareness. And that's the end of this story for us. But it leaves us with the question, having arrived at, so to speak, something which does not have an opposite, love and hate, truth and lies, good luck, bad luck. What have we arrived at when we explore? What does grace mean for us? What say you? What is it when we're looking at finding? What is it that's present when existence and non-existence, permanency and impermanency meet? What say you? If we look now at the meaning for us of something which has no opposite, like the word grace, it puts us in a place we are beyond duality. beyond the opposites. So if we look at this word, looking at it as an aperture, recognizing that there is something that has no counter force, no opposite, don't you think we're getting somewhere? Wouldn't you say so?
Yes. I keep getting the word equanimous,
Yes?
but I don't know how to explain it in the story.
Yes?
But I mean, I suppose if what that maiden is casting off is of use to somebody else,
Yes.
and what the person who received what she cast off would also cast something off, and that would be of use to some other, not necessarily human, but a creator.
But it brings us back to life and life's opposites. One man's meat is another man's poison, blah, blah. We have all of these things, isn't it?
And that economy is in